The night of October 14, 2022, started like any other Friday in Harlan, Kentucky, a small Appalachian town tucked so deep into the eastern mountains that the cell signal cuts out if you drive 2 miles in the wrong direction. Population just under 2,000. The kind of place where everybody knows your truck, your dog's name, and what you had for dinner last Tuesday. The kind of place where nothing ever really happens, until it did. The Whitfield family savings mart had been sitting on Route 421 for going on 37 years. It was the last stop before the highway thinned out into winding mountain roads and tree lines, so dense they swallowed headlights whole. Old Earl Whitfield, the owner, had installed a brand new 8-camera security system back in the spring, not because he expected trouble, but because his insurance company gave him a discount for it. He liked to joke about it, actually. Told his wife Linda it was the best $400 he'd ever spent. He had no idea how right he was going to be. On the night in question, the store closed at 10 p.m. sharp. The closing shift was handled by 23-year-old Marcus Webb, a Harlan local who'd been working at the Savings Mart since he was 17. Reliable kid. Never missed a shift, never came in late. Never gave Earl a single reason to worry. Marcus locked the front doors, counted the register, bagged the deposit, and set the alarm just like he always did. The interior cameras captured all of it, every mundane, routine movement, right up until 47 p.m., when Marcus walked out the back employee exit and disappeared into the parking lot. The exterior camera above that back door picked him up the moment he stepped outside. You can see him clearly. Dark hoodie, jeans, white sneakers, brown deposit bag under his left arm. He pauses for just a second, like he forgot something. Looks back at the door, then turns and starts walking toward his car. A beat-up silver Honda Civic parked about 40 feet away under a flickering lot light. He makes it about 20 feet. Then the camera catches something that, even now, 2 years later, nobody has been able to fully explain. From the far left edge of the frame, from an area of the parking lot that sat in complete darkness beyond the reach of the lot lights, something moves. Not a shadow exactly, more like a shape, a presence. It crosses into the weak outer ring of the parking lot light for no more than 3 seconds before the feed cuts to static. Just 3 seconds of grainy, compressed video footage. 3 seconds that launched a criminal investigation, sparked a federal review, and to this day remain one of the most debated pieces of security footage in eastern Kentucky history. Marcus Webb never made it to his car. When Earl Whitfield arrived the next morning at 7:15 to open up, he found the Honda Civic still sitting in the lot, driver's door hanging open, engine not running. The deposit bag was on the ground beside the front tire, unzipped but not emptied, $412 in cash still inside. Marcus's phone was on the asphalt about 6 feet from the car, screen cracked but still lit up with a notification from a fantasy football app. Earl called 911 at 7:22 a.m. By noon, the Harlan County Sheriff's Department had the parking lot cordoned off with yellow tape and was pulling footage from every camera on the system. They watched the recordings 3 times before anyone said a word. The lead investigator that day was Detective Ray Coburn, a 20-year veteran who had worked everything from meth lab busts to domestic homicides in these mountains. A man who prided himself on staying calm, staying analytical, staying 2 steps ahead of the panic that crime scenes tend to generate. Even Ray went quiet when they hit that 3-second clip. "Watch it again," he said. They watched it 4 more times. Nobody in that room could agree on what they were seeing. And that right there, that moment of confusion, of seasoned law enforcement officers second, guessing their own eyes, that's where this story really begins. Because Marcus Webb had vanished in a town with 1 road in and 1 road out. No witnesses, no confirmed suspect, and a security camera that captured something in those 3 seconds that nobody could explain and nobody could ignore. The mountains around Harlan don't give up their secrets easy. But this one was coming out whether they were ready or not. Detective Ray Coburn was not the kind of man who spooked easily. 20 years in Harlan County law enforcement had a way of sandpapering down whatever softness a person started with. He'd pulled bodies out of the Cumberland River. He'd walked through trailers where the walls told stories nobody wanted to read. He'd sat across interrogation tables from men with empty eyes and listened to things that still followed him home some nights. Ray was built for this work in the way that certain people just are, quietly, stubbornly, almost against their own will. But Saturday morning, sitting in the back office of the Whitfield Savings Mart with a cold cup of coffee and a laptop screen showing that 3-second clip on loop, Ray felt something he hadn't felt in a long time. He felt like he was missing something obvious. And that bothered him more than the clip itself. The shape, and that's genuinely the best word anyone could agree on, shape, entered the frame from the bottom left corner at Hun 49V03 p.m. It moved with what looked like deliberate, controlled speed, not running, not stumbling, moving the way someone moves when they know exactly where they're going, and they're in no particular rush about it. It passed through approximately 8 feet of visible lot light before the camera feed went to static at Hun 49V06. 3 seconds. The feed came back online at 10V, 49E41, 35 seconds of dead air, and when it did, the parking lot was empty. Marcus Webb was gone. The Honda Civic sat exactly where it had been all night. Door still closed at that point, suggesting whatever happened occurred in those 35 seconds, or immediately after the feed resumed. The technical team from the sheriff's department pulled the DVR unit that same afternoon and sent it up to Lexington for analysis. The initial report came back within 48 hours. The static was caused by a localized signal disruption, consistent with a high-powered electromagnetic pulse device, or as the tech analyst carefully noted, consistent with certain types of industrial equipment operating in close proximity to the camera's receiver. That second explanation was almost immediately ruled out. There was no industrial equipment anywhere near that parking lot. The nearest thing was a vending machine inside the store, and it had been unplugged for 2 weeks with a handwritten UTOFORDR sign taped to it. That left option 1 on the table. And option 1 had implications that made Ray's jaw tighten every time he thought about it. Whoever, or whatever, had been in that parking lot may have come prepared. Marcus Webb's family was interviewed the morning the disappearance was reported. His mother, Donna Webb, a soft-spoken woman in her mid-50s who worked the front desk at the county health department, sat at her kitchen table with both hands wrapped around a coffee mug and answered every question in a voice that was so steady it was almost unnerving. She said Marcus had no enemies she knew of, no debt problems, no relationship drama. He'd broken up with his girlfriend, Kayla Sparks, back in the spring, but it had been mutual and they were still on good terms. Donna had seen them talking outside the Dollar General just 2 weeks prior. Nothing tense about it. She said Marcus had been talking lately about saving up enough to move to Lexington. Maybe take some classes at the community college. Get out of Harlan the way a lot of young people talked about getting out of Harlan, though not all of them actually did it. He was happy. Donna said, "I know people always say that, but Marcus genuinely was. He had plans." Ray noted it. He noted everything. Kayla Sparks was interviewed that same afternoon at her apartment on Ivy Street, about 6 blocks from downtown. She was 22, worked at a hair salon on Central Street, and she was visibly shaken, red around the eyes, hands that wouldn't quite stay still. She confirmed what Donna had said about the breakup. Said it had been her idea, actually, and that Marcus had taken it well. She hadn't spoken to him in about a week, she said. The last text between them was about a mutual friend's birthday party. Neither of them ended up attending. Ray asked her if Marcus had mentioned anything unusual lately. Anyone new in his life. Anyone he seemed uncomfortable around. Kayla thought about it for a long moment. Long enough that Ray leaned forward slightly without meaning to. "There was one thing," she said finally. Maybe 2 weeks ago. He texted me kind of out of nowhere. Said he thought someone had been following him home from work. I figured he was just being paranoid. You know how Route 421 gets at night. Every set of headlights feels like it's on you. She paused. I told him he was overthinking it. I told him Harlan's safe. She looked down at her hands. I told him nothing ever happens here. The tip about the tail. Marcus, believing someone had been following him home from work, didn't stay quiet for long. In a town like Harlan, information moves the way water moves through limestone, slow at first, then suddenly everywhere at once. By Monday morning, 2 days after Marcus vanished, Ray Coburn had 3 separate people calling the tip line to say they'd noticed an unfamiliar vehicle parked along Route 421 in the weeks leading up to October 14th. All 3 descriptions were different in the details, but consistent in the basics: a dark-colored sedan, older model, no front license plate, parked in pull-offs along the stretch of highway between the Savings Mart and the residential streets where Marcus lived. Ray pulled traffic camera footage from the 2 county road cameras that covered Route 421. The system was outdated, low resolution, 12 frames per second. The kind of setup that looked more like a slideshow than actual video. But it was something. His deputy, a sharp 28-year-old named Brianna Solt, who had joined the department straight out of Eastern Kentucky University and was already better at digital forensics than anyone else on the force, spent 14 hours going through the footage frame by frame across a 3-week window. She found the car, or rather, she found what might have been the car, 4 separate instances across 11 days, October 3rd, 6th, 9th, and 12th, showing a dark vehicle, consistent with a mid-size sedan, sitting in the gravel pull-off across from the Savings Mart between the hours of 9 and 11 p.m. The resolution was too poor to pull a reliable plate. The make and model analysis came back inconclusive, possibly a late 90s or early 2000s Chevrolet Malibu or Ford Taurus. Nothing more specific than that. In 3 of the 4 instances, the car was gone from the pull-off before the next camera sweep 30 minutes later. In the 4th instance, on October 9th, it simply wasn't there in one frame and was back in the next, which suggested it had moved and returned during the gap. Someone had been watching that parking lot. That much felt certain. What wasn't certain was who, or why, or whether it connected directly to what happened to Marcus on the 14th. Ray requested a federal consult on the electromagnetic disruption angle. The FBI field office out of Lexington sent a tech specialist named Agent Dana Ferraro, a serious woman in her late 30s who drove up on Tuesday morning and spent 3 hours at the crime scene with equipment Ray didn't recognize and couldn't have named if asked. She walked the parking lot in a methodical grid pattern, ran readings along the exterior wall where the camera receiver was mounted, and crouched for a long time in the far left corner of the lot. The darkness beyond the light line, where that shape had first appeared on the footage. When she stood up, she was holding something in a gloved hand, small, dark, about the size of a thick matchbook. "You find what I think you found?" Ray asked. Ferraro looked at him with an expression that wasn't quite satisfaction and wasn't quite alarm. Something in between. "It's a signal jammer," she said. "Consumer grade, but modified. Someone left it behind or dropped it. It's been sitting against that curb, probably since the night of." Ray stared at it. "So it was deliberate." "The disruption was deliberate," Ferraro said carefully. "That's what the evidence tells us. Everything else is still your problem." The jammer was sent to the FBI lab in Quantico. Results would take weeks. In the meantime, Ray turned his attention to something that had been nagging at him since the first morning: the deposit bag. $412, untouched. In Ray's experience, and in most investigative experience across the board, that single detail eliminated the most statistically common motive for a crime like this: robbery. If someone had followed Marcus Webb for 11 days, disrupted a security camera with modified equipment, and executed a disappearance in under 30, 5 seconds in a dark parking lot. They weren't after $400 in small bills. They were after Marcus specifically, which meant this was targeted. Which meant Marcus Webb knew something, had something, or was something that made him worth planning for. Ray went back to the interviews. Read every note. Listened again to the recordings. And on his third pass through Donna Webb's interview, he caught something he'd marked, but not fully chased down the first time. Near the end of the conversation, when Ray had asked about Marcus's daily routine, Donna had mentioned almost offhandedly that Marcus had recently started picking up a second shift, not at the savings mart, but somewhere else. Somewhere she was vague about. He said it was just some side work, she'd told Ray, helping someone out. He didn't really get into it. Ray pulled out his notepad and circled that line. In his 20 years, the phrase, "just some side work," had never once led somewhere simple, not once. The side work lead took 4 days to crack open, and when it did, it didn't crack, it exploded. Ray started with Marcus's bank records, which required a judge's order, and took 2 days to come through. What he found was straightforward on the surface: Marcus's regular savings, mart paychecks deposited every 2 weeks, modest amounts, consistent with part-time retail work. Nothing unusual going back 18 months. But starting in late August, roughly 6 weeks before he disappeared, there were 3 separate cash deposits. $600 on August 28th, $800 on September 14th, $1,100 on October 1st, all cash, all deposited at the Harlan branch of People's Bank on weekday mornings, always within 2 days of each other, never on the same day of the week twice. $2,500 in 6 weeks. For a 23-year-old making $11 an hour in eastern Kentucky, that wasn't pocket change, that was a signal. Ray brought Donna Webb back in, not to the station, but to her kitchen table again, same place, same coffee mug. He showed her the deposit records without explaining them first and watched her face. She wasn't surprised exactly, but she wasn't comfortable either. She set the paper down slowly. "He told me he was helping someone move some equipment," she said. "Storage units," he said, "out past Loyal, a small unincorporated community about 4 miles outside of Harlan proper. Mostly residential, a few old commercial properties, a stretch of industrial lots that had been sitting half empty since the coal industry pulled back." "Did he give you a name?" Ray asked. "Whoever hired him." Donna thought for a moment. "He mentioned a guy once. Said his name was Terrence. That's all I got. Just Terrence." Ray drove out to Loyal that same afternoon with Deputy Solt. They didn't have an address, just a direction and a hunch. Solt had already been running searches on storage facility registrations in the Loyal area and had come up with 2 active commercial leases on industrial lots off Miners Creek Road, both registered to Shell LLCs with addresses that traced back to a mail forwarding service in Louisville. The first lot was empty. Padlocked gate, overgrown gravel, a rusted metal building that looked like it hadn't been touched in years. The second lot was different. The gate was padlocked too, but the gravel was fresh, compressed, recently laid, the kind of surface you put down when you're expecting regular vehicle traffic. The metal building at the back of the lot was newer, still had manufacturer stickers on 2 of the side panels. And along the base of the fence line, Solt spotted something that made her stop walking. Tire tracks, multiple sets, wide wheelbase, heavy vehicle, coming in and going out several times over, based on the layering. Ray called it in and got a warrant by 9 that evening. What they found inside that building the next morning reframed everything. The space had been cleared out, recently, thoroughly, professionally, but cleared out in haste, because whoever had done it left traces behind that a careful, unhurried exit would not have left. A folding table with a broken leg leaning against the far wall. Zip ties on the floor cut, not unclasped. A smell that the state police forensic unit later identified as consistent with industrial solvent. And beneath that, something biological that they declined to specify in the initial field report. and on the concrete floor near the back wall, caught in a crack in the slab where no amount of quick cleaning would reach it, a partial boot print, size 11 or 12, and next to it, a small rectangle of laminated paper, a work ID badge, Harlan County Municipal Water Authority. The photo on it was not Marcus Webb. The name on it was not Marcus Webb. The name on it was Gary Allen Pryor, a 54-year-old Water Authority employee who, when Ray ran him that afternoon, came back with a record. Aggravated assault 2009, charges reduced. A civil lawsuit in 2017 involving a former business partner settled out of court. And one other item that made Ray set the phone down on his desk and sit very still for a moment. Gary Allen Pryor had filed a missing persons report in September 2021, 13 months before Marcus Webb disappeared. The subject of that report was his own nephew, 21 years old. Last seen leaving a job site off Miners Creek Road. The report had been filed, logged, and gone cold within 60 days. Ray pulled the old file. The investigating officer on record was a deputy who had since retired. The case notes were thin, almost suspiciously thin. 2 interviews logged. No forensic work. Closed with a notation that the nephew had likely left the area voluntarily. Ray stared at that notation for a long time. Then he picked up the phone and called Agent Ferraro in Lexington. "I think Marcus Webb wasn't the first one," he said. There was a pause on the line. "How many are we talking?" Ferraro asked. "I don't know yet," Ray said. "But that building off Miners Creek Road, someone was using it for something. And someone made sure we'd never find out what." He looked down at the work ID badge sealed in its evidence bag on his desk. Gary Allen Pryor's laminated face staring up at him from under the plastic. "The problem," Ray said quietly, "is that Gary Pryor was found dead in his truck on Route 119 this morning. Carbon monoxide. Medical examiner is calling it accidental." Another pause. "Ray," Ferraro said. "Yeah. How fast can you get your files secured off-site?" Ray was already standing up. The investigation into Marcus Webb's disappearance was formally absorbed by the FBI's Louisville field office on November 3, 2022. 20 days after Marcus walked out the back door of the Whitfield Savings Mart and into whatever was waiting for him in that parking lot. Ray Coburn was notified by phone, professionally, courteously, and in a way that made absolutely clear his involvement was no longer required. He was told the case was being handled at a federal level now. He was told there were elements to the investigation that extended beyond Harlan County jurisdiction. He was told, in the careful language that federal agencies use when they want to say something without technically saying it, that certain aspects of what he'd uncovered touched on an ongoing operation that predated Marcus Webb's disappearance by several years. Ray asked what that meant for Marcus. There was a pause that lasted just long enough to answer the question without words. He filed his complete case notes, made 3 copies, and stored them in locations he has never publicly disclosed. He still lives in Harlan, still drives the same roads, still stops for coffee at the same gas station on Route 421, 200 yards from the Savings Mart parking lot, where a new security camera now sits above the back door, higher resolution, wider angle, the kind Earl Whitfield upgraded to after everything happened. Ray looks at it sometimes when he pulls out of the lot. Thinks about 35 seconds of dead air and a shape moving through 8 feet of weak parking lot light. He doesn't talk about the case much, but he doesn't not talk about it either. The FBI has never issued a public statement about what they found, or didn't find, in the building off Miners Creek Road. The forensic results from that site were classified under a federal investigative hold within 72 hours of the initial sweep, a designation that sealed them from public records requests and kept them out of any court filing that might surface through normal legal channels. A Freedom of Information Act request filed by a Louisville journalist in early 2023 came back 11 months later with every substantive page either redacted to a single black rectangle or withheld entirely under Exemption 7. The law enforcement exemption, used to protect ongoing investigations. As of the filing of that FOI response, the investigation was still described as active. The signal jammer recovered from the Savings Mart parking lot was confirmed by the Quantico lab to have been modified using components sourced from 3 separate manufacturers across 2 countries. The modification required a working knowledge of electronics that went beyond hobbyist level. The jammer itself had been wiped of fingerprints, but not of something else. Trace amounts of a chemical compound used in certain types of commercial vehicle maintenance, a compound common to fleet operations, large fleet operations, the kind maintained by municipalities, the kind maintained by, for example, a county water authority. That detail never made it into any public report. Ray found it in a lab appendix that was included in his file before the federal handoff, likely by accident. He noticed it. He wrote it down. He said nothing. Donna Webb still lives on the same street in Harlan. She goes to work every morning, comes home every evening, keeps her porch light on after dark the way she started doing the week Marcus disappeared and never stopped. She gave one interview, about 8 months after it happened, to a local paper. She said she still expected to hear his key in the door sometimes. Said the mind does that, keeps running the program even after the program has no reason left to run. She said the hardest part wasn't the not knowing. She'd made a kind of peace with not knowing, the way people in hard places learn to make peace with hard things. The hardest part, she said, was the security footage. The way it just stopped. The way there was something there, and then there was static, and then there was nothing, and the world just kept going like the in-between didn't matter, like 35 seconds could just be swallowed up, and no one could make them give back what they took. Marcus Webb has never been found. No remains, no confirmed sightings, no credible leads that have ever been made public. His case sits in the National Missing and Unidentified Persons Database, with a last known location of Harlan, Kentucky, and a case status that reads open. The 3 other young men Ray's team identified as potentially connected through financial patterns, through geographic overlap, through the paper, thin case files that closed too fast and asked too few questions. Their families have never been officially notified of any connection. Whether that connection was ever formally investigated at the federal level is unknown. Gary Allen Pryor's death was ruled accidental. The case was closed in December 2022. No further inquiry was conducted into his history with the Miners Creek Road property or his relationship to the Shell LLCs that held the leases. The Savings Mart is still open. Earl still runs it. The parking lot light above the back exit was replaced with a brighter fixture sometime in early 2023, the kind that leaves no weak outer ring, no gray border where the light fades into dark. Just clean, flat illumination all the way to the fence line. As if light alone could fix the problem. As if whatever came out of that darkness needed the dark to do it. The cameras roll every night. The lot sits empty after 10. The mountains hold their silence the way they always have, patient, indifferent, full of things that go in and don't come out. And somewhere in a federal filing system, behind Exemption 7 and a wall of black rectangles, 35 seconds of answered questions sit in the dark, waiting for someone with the right clearance to turn the lights on.